Ask the Podcast Coach for January 11th, 2025.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you, and it's always good to be on Ask the Podcast Coach. Of course, thinking about our podcasting friends and all of our friends in Los Angeles this morning and the terrible things that are happening there. And hopefully everyone is safe and has gotten out of the way, and there'll be some rebuilding to do. We're thinking about you guys this morning.
Yeah, it's crazy when you see like a lot of like Hollywood, like they were worried the Hollywood sign was going to catch on fire, and just I'm not sure,
Nothing is forever, Dave. Nothing is forever. That's the thing. Nothing is forever.
Yeah. So definitely our hearts go out to those. And I had a friend of mine that a couple years ago moved from California to Texas, and he is no longer regretting that. He didn't regret it anyway. But I texted him yesterday. I go, "You're probably not missing LA right now." He's like, "Nope." So that's spooky, and it's it travels so fast. So yeah, if you got some bucks, I don't know. I threw $20 at Red Cross yesterday. I was like, you know what? I'm like, that's nothing. I'm like, if everybody gave a little nothing, that would be a benefit. So and I'm not sure, but you're probably losing sleep over this. I'm trying to do it. How do you get a transition out of a catastrophe?
Let's just do the four. There's no good way to transition.
There's no good way. Yeah. So this coffee pour, of course, is brought to you by who's and there probably are, if we go back to John Lee Dumas, there's some on fire jokes in here we could throw in, but no, not a time for humor. That is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. The beauty of Mark is the fact that not only has he been podcasting for, I think, 9 years, maybe longer than that, he's an award-winning graphic artist. He's done a lot of work for me, and the fact he just offers such personalized service. And this doesn't have to be artwork. If you're watching the video right now, I'm showing some of his work. But this could be a whole website. It could be a PDF. I know I'm getting a PDF ready for Podfest. We could have used Mark for that. You can, whatever it needs. He's got the marketing brain and the graphic skills. And the beauty of it is he's going to sit down with you one-on-one to make sure that it matches your brand. And if you go, I don't have a brand, he'll help you make one. It's all there. It's at podcastbranding.co. And when you go over there, be sure to tell him that Dave and Jim sent you, and check out his podcast, Resourceful Designer, while you're at it.
And of course, a big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. This week, and I mentioned it last week, Maria, if you didn't get out there to listen to it, do that today. Available for you out there, and a great episode. You want to have a listen to it. Holidays are past, but maybe you still need another podcast to listen to, or you just want to listen to excellent production. Check it out today, based on a true story podcast.com. And Dan, thank you for your sponsorship.
Yeah, what's interesting is this time of year is we end up, I'm hoping that's going to do, now if I do this, in theory, yes, okay. It's that time of year where people kind of freak out over things that maybe they shouldn't freak out or whatever kind of things. They overthink stuff. I had one I marked that was classic overthinking. Well, here's one. Speaking, it's not overthinking, but it's something that you should have thought about. And that is, who owns the podcast theme I compose? Well, this should be something you figure out before, and he says, hello, I regularly make podcast themes for paying customers. One recently asked me who owns the copyright. Believe it or not, this just came up. I'm not well versed in the law and don't use contracts. It's usually just emails and kind of casual process. I know I should use contracts, of course, but usually these things go smoothly. So, what is the answer to this question? Does he, the one hiring me, own the theme, or do I own it since I made all the music? And of course, Jim and I will be the first to say we're not lawyers. We don't even play them on TV. But this is you have to design what are you selling? If you're selling a license to use the music, then you own it and you're more or less renting it to them. But most of the time, people are looking for, um, a royalty free kind of deal so that when they buy it, they own it. And so I never thought about this because everything I think I use Tune. Oh, there's so many. I'm trying to, Ecamm is being a little weird this morning to where I've always that I'm like, I can't, I'm looking for the window for the chat. I realized our chat has run away and I'm like, oh, it's not here. I've interviewed chat. But um, it's just one of those things you might want to think about when when you're buying music, because there are places like I use Audio Blocks and I'm basically renting a bunch of music. They have a huge library and I use that. And it's like $100 a year. It's not super cheap, but it is something that I use enough to where it's worth it. And so you kind of want to be careful with that if you're buying music to make sure that when you're buying it, you're not renting it because you might be surprised by that. Because it might be all of a sudden you find out it's next year and they're like, hey, you didn't pay for your thing. And you're like, wait, I already paid you. I paid you last year. That might be a problem. And so uh, keep that in mind. And then the other thing you might want to keep in mind, uh, Jim, you had a fun week this week where you had a hard drive take a
Oh yeah.
dive. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a reminder. We talk about this all the time, but I have visuals. So if you're watching on the video, you can see this 2 terabyte. It's an older drive, 2 terabyte Western Digital that I've written on it. Bad, right? And it's bad. It's never coming back. There was data on it that I won't be able to retrieve. The good news is I was able to get it, have it. It wasn't a sole drive. In other words, the data that was on it, that's not the only place it was. It was in a system that backed up the other drives. I use Unraid, but there's QNAP or there's Synology or there's a variety of different. I think even Ugreen has a NAS now that can protect you from those kinds of things. But I had a plan around. Okay, if this drive fails, what am I going to do? In my case, I just could pull it out, tested it just to see if it was really bad, and then it was indeed. And then we just replaced it with a new one, and that the system rebuilt it. The key, I think, on this, in what I wanted to say, because we've talked about backups and cloud-based stuff and some of those kinds of things, we haven't really spent very much time thinking about the drives themselves and being able to check the health on those. Hard drives, for a long time now, have had a let's say some data on them associated with them on their firmware called smart, right? And a lot of the readers that are out there, a lot of the hardware readers that can read these files, um, they'll tell you the health of those drives. One of my favorite ones is one called Crystal Disk. It's available for free. You can download it. It's been around a long time. It actually kind of looks like an old Windows program when you run it. But with Crystal Disk, you can download that on a Windows machine, run it, and it will bring back all, and I mean all, I don't even know what some of it means, but all of that smart information will come back to you.
Hmm.
It'll give you some kind of status on hey, how many hours has this drive been running? How many times has this drive been turned off and turned back on, which is kind of nice. You'll see its current temperature, and you can set some temperature. They have some temperature guidelines on it, but you can see what it's currently running at. A lot of people don't think about, they put their hard drive in and then they don't never think about how hot this thing actually gets. And does where you have the drive, does it have good cooling? Is there a fan on it? Is it,
Hmm.
because these things get hot. I don't think a lot of people know how hot a hard drive gets inside of your computer. You're kind of insulated from it. You never think about it. You're thinking about your CPU maybe getting hot. Yeah, maybe have a fan on that. A lot of folks don't think about cooling down their hard drives as they get pretty warm. Now they're built to run. I mean, they're tanks. These things are, you could kill somebody with this thing, right? This with this hard drive. You throw it at them. It's pointy, it's got sharp corners, it's heavy, a lot of magnets in it. But you could, getting that data again, Crystal Disk is the name of that. You can download it for free, and it'll just give you some information. Maybe a good idea to download that today and take a look at some of the data. Your average drive, 5 or 6 years old, has 50 or 60,000 hours of use on it, right? I had this drive, 112,000 hours. I've had it for a decade.
Yeah.
I've had this for a long time. So maybe a good idea just to do a little inventory on that part of your hardware and see how your drives are doing.
And of course, Crystal Disc also has that top 40 country song going up the charts.
Yes.
Like,
I love Crystal. I love her.
she's awesome.
I love her. I love her style. Yeah.
I saw, I think her Haley something at a Tiny concert. She had a song, I kept the ring and he got the finger. And I was like, that sounds like somebody making fun of a country song, but no, it actually was a real one. Randy says, being the IT nerd here,
Yep.
and
I use Unraid. I use Unraid too.
Unraid server has 8 4 terabyte drives, and they run about 28 to 32 degrees Celsius.
It's very cool. That is very cool, by the way. Yeah.
The system has 8 120. Oh, my eyes aren't working.
Fans. Millimeter.
Yeah.
120 millimeter fans.
Yeah. My first house, I had all my computer stuff in the attic because it was huge and it was somewhat finished, or so I thought. But I found out quickly when summer rolled around, the air conditioning doesn't come up here. And I literally by the, 9 o'clock, I'm still in my underwear, just sweating bullets. And I remember when I got around to July and August, my computer would just shut off. It'd be like, okay, we're out. See ya. So I bought a little, air conditioning unit to put in the window, and that stopped it from shutting down, but it was still really, really hot. So,
yeah. Heat. Listen, on the computers, heat is not your friend. Stephanie had said Unraid ? Okay, I'll check it out. Just know in the NAS, right, network attached storage is what that stands for. In the NAS space, there are self-service options, and Unraid is one of those self-service. You would bring your own hardware, so to speak, and then you would add the Unraid software. They now have paid subscription options. So it used to be free. Way back in the day, it was open source and it was free. Now, it wasn't that great. And Lime Technologies took them over and has made it a paid offering. Like Dave, like you say all the time, if the service is free, it's probably not going to last very long, right? So it's a paid kind of subscription, annual service subscription for Unraid. But you do have kind of all-in-one built-in solutions you can go with. Today, you could argue with me on this if you want, but today Synology is probably the leader in that space. And then there's things like QNAP or Ugreen has a NAS. There's a bunch of Chinese branded NASs that are out there that are fairly cheap. I can't speak for any of them. So self-service or you kind of buy it all in one. You're gonna spend to have a NAS. And listen, the value of having a NAS and multiple drives is all that if one drive goes bad, the others will back them up, and then you can pull that drive, put a new drive in, and you're back in business. It's one step in the backup process. It's not a backup in the sense that, like, in a situation like we just talked about in LA, right? Imagine I was watching a video of a YouTuber podcaster this morning who lost his house. And he said, this is kind of what got me thinking about it. He said, and there's they got back into the area and they got to his house in ashes, right? And he's like, he was showing the studio and then he was showing a picture of what it looked like when, before the fire. And then he's like, the only thing I really regret is my laptop. And he points down, his laptop's just melted.
Right.
And he says, I had pictures on that of the cats and friends and stuff that I hadn't gotten off. A NAS is not a backup in the sense that you, like in this case, if it's in your house and your house burns down and that's the only place it is, it's not really backed up. So
Yeah.
the it is another place, right? So you keep it on you keep it locally, you could keep it on a NAS. That NAS could be replicating out to the cloud. So don't think of it as like a rock solid. There was for a while, there was a company that was building fireproof enclosures for hard
Hmm.
drives, which was really really interesting. And so in that kind of case, as soon as it sensed heat, the foam, there was insulation on the inside that would expand, and then it would protect the hard drives that were inside of it through the fire. So
Hmm.
I had fire rated outside. Now they were fairly expensive, but kind of like buying a safe for your paperwork. That paperwork that you don't want to go away in a fire.
Yeah.
You could buy a fireproof hard drive enclosure for your house as well.
Didn't
And
know that
so
existed.
yeah, yeah. There's not many of them that's out there,
Right.
and that company that did it is I think they're still out there. But those are some of those things, Dave, to think about. Is okay. So you have to think when you think about data loss, you have to think about it in two ways, right? One is traditional disaster, like we're thinking a tornado or a fire, or you're thinking, some of those kinds of things that you can't control, where the data's gone. Most people don't think about data loss from an idiot perspective. When you lose the data, when you delete it automatically, when you do something dumb to it, and you have to think like, okay, is there a good copy of that somewhere else that I can go and grab, or am I versioning my files in a way that if I made a mistake editing the file or whatever and I want to go back to a version of it, is that available to me? So that's the one we almost never think about, is our own self-destructive tendencies to wipe stuff out. You've done this several times where you just got overzealous in your cleaning of
Oh yeah.
things, and then the file you needed is now gone,
I've
so to speak. So yeah.
I did luck out. There's a thing on GitHub where I was able to put in, because I have all my episodes in my feed, even at 900 and whatever I'm at on the School of Podcasting. And I was able to put in the feed and download all my finished episodes because I deleted some somewhere. And I was like, oh, I don't really care that I have the WAV file. I'm like, I just want a copy, just, I don't know, for the Dave Jackson Memorial, library. Yeah, exactly. Also, QNAP and Naz, weren't they in Wu-Tang, if I remember right? I was like,
Oh,
and for those of you that are, yeah, we need one of those. And we totally forgot,
And now,
oh yeah.
he's been waiting for this. It's time for Jim to get his nerd on.
I love the kids.
Little retrospect. Little
Yes.
retrospective. Yeah.
Yeah, you just listened to Jim getting his nerd on. So here's some Chris Stone from castahead.net. This is one of the benefits of the School of Podcasting. You got some cool people in there, and he pointed out this microphone. It's called the Shure MV7i. And when I first saw it, I was like, another MV7 something? Because it's like the MV7, the MV7 Plus, the MV7, et cetera, et cetera. But the back of this microphone, you look at it and you're like, okay, yeah, there's the XLR, and then you got a USB thing. But wait, it's different. What it does, and it's very unique in the XLR that you see there is a combo jack, means you can plug an XLR, or if I want to plug my guitar into it, that, my friend, on the back of this microphone is an input. So you have a USB.
Can you hover over that? Will it make it
Yeah,
bigger if you hover over that? There we go. Yeah.
Hold on, let me get.
That's super. I did not, when I was first a musician, I did not know you could do that with XLR. And so this is a really important point that you can. It's a lot. It's also a line. No, you were fine there for a second.
I was, and I'm like, come on, I'm back on the page. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So what's cool about this is, so you could have like the Shure Move mics, right? The little lavs, plug them on. They've got built-in noise, and through the Shure software. This is okay, but I want I want a little better quality on this. So what you do is you take any mic, a Rode mic, ATR 2100, whatever, and you've got your MV7 going into your laptop asterisk or your phone, going into the Shure software. You take this mic, plug it into mic number 1, and there's your studio. That's it. Now you're like, but Dave, so if you wanted to, this is great for people like, I keep getting bleed. I remember when I was in my office in Cleveland, and at one point I was in that corner and the ex-wife was in that corner. And now, of course, I was listening like this. I still hear you. And I'm like, no, don't listen to podcasts smashing your headphones into your head. But I could still hear her a little bit on my channel. I just added a noise gate and we're fine to go. But again, that is a classic example of podcasters obsessing over things that are just a little too crazy. And but this has a tool for noise removal. So if you had air conditioning or the furnace or whatever, it listens and just pops it out. And then it has some sort of plosive popper or something. I forget what they call it. They're calling it their first smart microphone. He says, I'm using it for mobile interviews. Yeah. So if you wanted something that wasn't lav mics, you want to take it on the road, 2 mics, 2 stands if you wanted to, and you're good to go. And I was like, now it's $349, so it's not the cheapest thing on the planet. But for me, this is like a great example just for podcasters. It's like it's a totally niche podcast because it's not going to be for everybody. But those people that like, look, I need good quality on the road and it has to be super travel ready. I'm like, here's your answer. And of course, if you want to do video, the Shure software does video as well. So you could pop it into your phone. With the phone, there's some special cable. I mean, I know Rode has one. If you want to plug your mic into the Rodecaster, either one, Duo, or you have to do this special Rode cable. And it's the same thing with Shure. They have a special cable if you want to plug this mic into your phone. If you've got a newer phone and it's just USB-C, you still might need the cable. I'd have to double check on that. But the fun part is, I without ever seeing it, I can guarantee you they get you on the cable. Because it's like, well, you need this if you want to do it. And you're like, well, I want to do it. So I guess I'm paying, whatever, $28 for a cable. I think is what I paid for the Rode one. And I was like, well, I need that and it won't work without it. So supply and demand says, this is what I'm going to do. So it's an interesting mic. I just was like, not sure. Like I said, I know people that record in the same room and they freak out over bleed. And that's just something I think sometimes we really obsess over. Like I can like even now, because I'm not really right on my mic. If I move this a little closer, I can hear a little room noise in my mic. But if I listen to this through earbuds, always listen the same way your audience does. If I put on my earbuds, if I went in the car, you're probably not going to notice the little bit of room noise I have going on here. Now, if it was something like, I don't know, can you hear this, Jim? Does it sound now like I'm in a tin can?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I sounded like this, that might be a problem. I might want to try to tune that out. But
only if we heard the toilet flush, then we would work.
Yeah. Then Chris says newer iPhones. So I guess I got to go get a phone now. That's it. That's the solution. Go buy a new phone. But the newer iPhones don't need a special cable for mobile.
What's newer, I wonder, on that one?
Probably, what is the latest one? 16?
16.
Something 16, like that. So Andrea says it's a really nice gear upgrade, but I just got the Rode Pod mic. I'll stay with this one for a while. Yeah, it never fails. Yeah. As soon as you buy something, it's when I bought the Shure Move mics, right after that, Rode came out with their little itty bitty lavs. And I was like, but the Shure Move mic has the noise reduction tool in it and things like that. So,
Randy says 15 or newer. 15 or newer, the ones with the USB-C instead of Lightning. That makes sense.
Thank you, Randy.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's got RGB on it, Dave. I mean, how can you not have a mic that has 16 million or whatever it is, 16.8 million colors to choose from? How would you decide? Well, you know what it is. I mean, you're playing to podcasters who want the mic to match their studio backgrounds.
That's it.
Right. That's what they want.
because
So
that's going to grow your audience. Forget the content. His mic matches the background. Yeah, that's not going to work.
well, it did. Listen, it does. It like especially for folks who've really tuned their studios. I think Chris Stone is one of those. His studio
Oh, it's crazy.
very color tuned, right? It looks awesome. Well, I mean, if you could, and if you could show that in the picture, and it was perfectly tuned to the colors of the studio, that does kind of look pro. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. So,
Well, and Deocasters, Chris's show is a video show, so it's got to look pretty. Well, it doesn't have to, but his does. I mean, he
mm,
can customize that thing to,
well, he
you know,
just said he needs 18 million hues.
that's it.
16.8 is not enough,
That's
so
it.
he's out.
Ralph says I really tried to use the Shure lapel mic for my show, and it was just not happy with it. I love my Rode Pod mic. Yep, a lot of love for the Rode Pod mic. That's what I'm using.
Mhm,
The thing
mhm.
is, they did I'll call it the Rode thing. I don't know who came up with it first, but you can go in and set your EQ and turn on the popper stopper and all this other stuff. And then when you save it, those settings are saved in the mic. So when you plug it in someplace else, and you're like, oh, I don't have the, whatever, you can actually, use that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Mhm, mhm.
Because the Rode does that as well. Um, says Ralph says it took me way too long to get the sticker on the end of my SM7B, so I'm not changing it. Yeah, if what you have works, don't change it. It is that time of year where I saw it in Facebook. People are like, well, it's new, so what are you going to change? And so much of it was gear, and they're like, yeah, I'm moving from an ATR 2100 to a whatever. And Jim, I'm going to put you on the screen. And I know you hate that. I don't see, and I see a bookcase behind you. Those come in handy.
Yeah.
But is there any official like foam treatment anywhere in your basement?
No.
Yeah.
Not any.
And
No, but I have a lot of soft things down here. I have
okay.
curtains over here. I have curtains in the back. Everything over here. There's a few hard surfaces, but I have a lot of soft stuff around me, especially
Okay.
in front of me. You can't see it this way, but
Because I was gonna say, because like you're using a 2100,
mhm.
you sound perfectly fine. Of course, you have great pipes. That helps.
Thank you, appreciate
But it's not like. And I there was a guy that was he's in a closet and he bought all this foam stuff and he's like he gets phlegmy in there for he's like I think it's the foam that somehow
it. Oh,
messes with his voice and he was gonna move and he's got a 2100. I'm like I'm pretty sure you're kind of going a little overkill. I don't
yeah.
know that the room has to be like I was in when I was in Nashville. I forget Danny's last name, but he has this kick butt studio and he does audio. He used to be a musician guy. Like he was in Nashville. And then, everybody got their own studio in their bedroom and that kind of dried up a little bit. So he started producing podcasts. And I walked into a room that was absolutely dead. It was cool, but I'm like, you don't need that for a podcast. You don't want it to be, fishbowl in a cave kind of thing. But it was weird to be in an actually 100% dead room that I
Yeah.
was like, wow,
It is a
that's,
little eerie when you get into those, and
yeah,
it's where sounds go to die. You you're like, What's going on in here?
yeah.
Who's died?" I think in my setup, the 2100 punches above its weight for what it does for me. I think there are some other mics that if I had would pick up more than I have here. And so I think I would if I went with an SM7B or if I went with an RE20 or 320, if I went with some of those higher end mics, I may need to do a little sound treatment down here, just to be honest. Now I've got open ceilings. So the first thing I would do is just buy acoustic tiles and then just put them right up into the ceilings and staple them in or whatever. That would be an easy, it'd be an easy sound. Sometimes bounces off the ceilings or bounces off the floors, carpet on the floors down here. So, and like I said, really soft surfaces around me. So I think the 2100 is covering a multitude of sins for me, I guess is what I'm saying. It's a good mic.
Well, and
I've used it for 10 years. It's
yeah,
just a
and I
good
mean, you're look how far is your mic from your mouth? Like the other thing is you have
uh
great mic technique. Yeah,
two
It's
two,
right
maybe
there.
three. Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the key when you're, if I move the mic away from me and I can talk louder now,
Right,
but you get
right.
all that kind of built-in reverb. Get that bad boy and if you're getting plosives, talk across it, which is what I kind of try to do, and
Yeah,
you're good to
yeah,
go.
yeah.
So,
Right on, right on.
all right. Well, the other thing that has come in is I went to perplexity.ai, one of my favorite search tools now. Sorry, Google, but you suck. And I asked them about the Spotify plan because that was announced in January. And I was like, hey, what's the criteria for Spotify's video program? Because it's going to be the best thing ever and everyone's going to get rich. And just all you got to do is put your video on Spotify and money will fall from heaven. And they said you need at least 12 episodes. But here's the one that gets me 10,000 streamed hours, not ever, no, in the past 30 days. 10,000 streamed hours. I don't want to do math live, but that's a lot of hours per day. And then 2,000 unique users versus YouTube. You need 500 subscribers, 3 valid uploads, and 3,000 valid public watch hours in the last 12 months, or 3 million valid public short view in the last 90 days. So to me, this is really targeted towards like the big peeps,
Yeah, for
celebrities,
sure. For sure.
and
It'll
then
come down. It'll come down. Spotify will bring this down eventually. They just don't want the unwashed masses. This has
right,
been Spotify's business plan from the very beginning, right? They have made it harder. Everybody else is like, bring me, you're tired and you're hungry, and we want everybody, right? That's everybody else.
right.
Spotify is like, nah, I want the 1%.
That's
Right.
it.
I want to start with the 1%. So just know it's a different model for them at Spotify. They're just not gonna they don't want us all jumping in there and messing up whatever they've created, right? They want to control it.
And then the other thing, the one that really counts is with YouTube, you get to keep they take 45%. So you keep 55%. With Spotify, it's 50-50. So they take an additional 5%. So I was like, not really. I mean, it's a stream of income, but I was just like, wow. So that's, we'll see. I did notice that, remember the one week I'm on Rumble this week as well. And what's cool is Rumble has now it's beta. So if this doesn't work, I'm not going to go yell at them. But remember I said it's kind of a bummer because every time you use Rumble, you have to go over and copy and paste 2 things into, in this case, Ecamm. Well, they just today, I went over and they have I don't know, static or a constant things that you put in. So we shall see. But we got a whopping 9 views over on Rumble. So,
Huh?
that's 9 people
Is,
more than I had before. So
is their chat tied into this chat? Are
I
we able to do they have a chat in Rumble, or is it
I would
just
think
video only?
it's very, I mean, if you look at it, it's just YouTube with a lot of guns.
Mm,
when,
okay.
when I logged in, it was like, look, guns everywhere. Like, okay. So yeah. Chris says, I hate it when a podcaster sends me over to their YouTube channel. Yeah, don't get me started. Randy says Rumble just received 775 million in funding. That's a lot. That's a little bit of cabbage right there. $775 million. Like that's, I wonder from who and why. So Ralph says, I love Rumble. Yep. And he says they do have a chat. Um, I know it's a freedom platform. I know they talk about everything over there. Just my first impression when I logged in, it was literally like they have like whatever 8 or 12 videos on it.
Are
I
you
logged
Dave
in.
Jackson over there?
I am probably School of Podcasting.
School of
Maybe,
Podcasting. That makes sense.
maybe.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
I ruined your joke. Sorry.
Yeah, Rumble says, or Chris says it's RTMP. Chat doesn't integrate with third-party streaming, so maybe they'll take some of that 775 million and make things a little more integratable. But yeah, it is an option. I hear a lot of people on YouTube. Well, not a lot. I've heard a few that have like, okay, well, that's going to do it for the show over here. We have other topics, but we talk about them on Rumble. And I was like, well, that's a different thing. And so we shall see how that goes over. Speaking of, since we're kind of talking different gear and such, here's another one that I was just like, this is why you need to plan your podcast ahead of time. And this might just be a case where he just naturally outgrew it. But how is the Rodecaster with connecting other audio interfaces? My friend and I have been podcasting for some time. I got to say, the Rodecaster Duo was an amazing investment for both of us. I invested in Rode pod mics and Rode XLR cables, and it worked out very well. They love Rode stuff. But here's the thing. Recently, our podcast has been catching our friends' attention, and we've asked if they want to be in episodes. Now, the Duo has worked out for us, but with a third person, okay, I thought they had 4, but third person, it gets complicated. We don't want to invest in the Rodecaster Pro just yet, and I might have a workaround, but I need some professional opinions. I have a Zoom PodTrack P4 for my earliest podcasting days or from my days, and a USB-C to USB-C cable. I noticed that the Duo has a port for USB-C connections too, which normally plugs into a computer. Yep. If so, the follow-up question would be, can I basically use this? Wait a minute. So I can use my Rode Pod mic for a guest. So the follow-up question, basically they want to use the Zoom PodTrack P4 to plug into the Rodecaster Duo as a third input. And if a plug in a headset onto the P4's headphone jack whilst it's connected to the Duo, can the guest hear the sound effects? No, they would not, because what you'd have to take, you could take a headphone out. Boy, that's tricky. You'd have to take the headphone out of the Rodecaster into an input of the P4 and take the output of the P4 and run it into the Rodecaster, and that just sounds like a disaster for a loop, basically. But my whole thing is, you got a P4 sitting right there, because, I mean, you could, here's the fun thing, you could plug 2 people into the P4, take the output of the P4, put it into channel 2 of the Duo. So you got 1 person on channel 1 and 2 people on channel 2, and you're using the P4 as a mixer. But I'm like, you got a P4 sitting right there. I don't know. Maybe just use the P4. I'm not quite sure. Yes, it doesn't have all the fun-filled effects that are on the Rodecaster, but I'm like, sometimes we add so many hurdles that I'm like, I think you're just kind of, again, you've got a P4 sitting right there rather than trying to run. I know I've heard people plugging in USB mics into the Duo because I have my computer plugged into it. If I want to play sound effects from my second computer, it goes into my USB thing. So, Andreas says if it's all locally, the P4 would make for the recording and do the editing later. That's me. I'm like, I'm not sure. It's probably just one of those things like you get into your habits and you're like, well, everything has to be recorded on the road. I'm like, nope. But and Chris says, yeah, but unfortunately, the general public will decide what they want to call it, regardless of what is factual, and that is nothing to do. I think what we're talking about. Oh, I think they're talking about. Isn't that fun when you just read a comment halfway through, you like, oh, they're doing their own show in the chat room.
This doesn't apply.
Yeah, so it's that was just one I was like, why is this guy making it so hard? And then the other one, again, it was kind of like Road Day over at Reddit. And this one, the guy asked, I don't know if this actually exists, but I'm looking for a single board that has an audio mixer for like 2 mics and a video switcher for like 4 inputs in a single board, potentially where you can have it auto select video based on what mic is getting the input. The last part is pretty hard pressed. That one I don't know, but something kind of like a Blackmagic Design A10 Mini Pro and a Mackie whatever Pro FX V3. You can do this, not the auto switching thing, but you can do this with a Rodecaster Duo or Rodecaster Pro. And this is, I'm going to say something and I know it is accurate, but I've never done it and I do not understand it. But I know you can take the little sound effects in the Rodecaster. So I could basically take that and via MIDI map it to a lighting gear somehow and switch, no, not so much switch lights, switch cameras via MIDI, via the thing. Now, because everybody else was like, oh, just do the Rodecaster video, which would make sense. Randy's like, yeah, just do that. That thing's like, what is it? $1,200? It's a lot, whatever it is. And I was like, well, if you've already got a Rodecaster Duo, like maybe just let me go over to Sweetwater. I would try learning the MIDI jingle button thing. So Rode Video. Let's see. Rode Videocaster. Yes, it is. Survey says
Yeah, it's 1,200. You were right on.
$1,200. I was right. Yeah.
Yeah.
$11.99. And I don't know about you, but where I come from, that's a chunk of change.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know. Just to me, as much as sometimes people try to, like the one guy's trying to put the P4, like, hey, just use the P4. In this case, you might actually, and this is one of the things where really knowing what your gear is capable of. Because there's nothing worse than buying gear and then coming home and like, oh, wait, what? I could have done that with, Adobe has that built in. I didn't know that, or Descript or whatever. So yeah, be careful with that because, that's no fun. Here's a fun question. Jim, can you have a successful podcast without social media? He says, I'm thinking about starting an interview style podcast in 2025 to hear about everyday people's stories and learn what really makes them unique, even if they're an average Joe. So the audience can do what? Like, what's the benefit? I don't have social media. I know a lot of podcast success is credited to making TikToks and Reels from YouTube videos. While I want also, that's what he says, do visual posts on YouTube. Do you think I can be successful without these ad forms? If there is an alternative way to get my podcast out there without social media, what would you recommend? Or is it simply, if you want to get outreach, you have to get back on socials response? I am mainly doing this as an outlet to meet people. Oh, there you go. There's his why. As it's really something I love, but of course, I would be a minority in saying I did want to go somewhere and get outreach. So, can you make a podcast? Can you make a successful podcast without social media? What say you, Jim Collison?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
You can do it. You can be
Yeah.
successful at anything without social media. Although, are you considering, if you had your own website, is that considered social media? I don't think it is. We're traditionally thinking about Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, blah 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 blah. Right?
That was me.
Yeah, I mean, you get old school it for sure, in with a website and word of mouth, getting your listeners to listen. If you have listeners that are listening to you, chances are they're like you. That's probably why. I mean, not only do they like you, but they're probably like you. That's why they're listening to you, right? Common interests, whatever. They probably know people that are like them that they can pass that along to, right? And I think the newsletter concept, I wouldn't consider newsletters social, so to speak. You could, depending on your demographic, but that's not true either. You get a good newsletter group going that just say, hey, I'm not going to be on those socials. This will be the way we'll communicate. I think you
Right.
absolutely could, for sure.
Yeah, Larry Roberts, the red hat guy. I'm assuming of course I will see him at Podfest. He's the guy behind the Podfest newsletter, so I'm pretty sure he's going to be there. Yeah, that would make sense. Speaking of newsletters,
yeah, I think very, very, very effective.
Yeah, he goes, but why limit your reach? Yeah, I look, and I'm no,
because they're awful. They're awful places. That's why they're terrible.
Can I ask a really weird question?
Mm.
Why does everybody hate X again? Is it just because Elon and they don't like Elon? And so they think, I'm going to show him I'm not going to pay him anymore. I'm going to not pay him anymore. I don't know.
A little bit of that going on. But overarching in general, right? I mean, some people just don't want to be part and parcel to those environments. And I don't blame them. I think when I retire, I may go dark. I just may I've had enough.
When my dad retired, he wouldn't answer the phone.
Yeah.
And I'd be like to my brother, I'm like, have you talked to Dad? And he's like, no. He goes, I keep calling him. Nobody's picking it up. I'm like, we should probably go check on him. So we go over to check on him. He's like, hey, I'm retired. I don't have to answer the phone anymore. And I'm like, well, we kind of think you're dead when you don't do that. You're like,
Right, right,
oh,
right,
okay. But he
right.
was, if he got a telemarketer, he would just ream him. He would get so upset. And I'm like, well, just hang up on him. Like, you don't have to, like, get your dandruff up.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Dan from Based on a True Story Podcast.com. In my honest opinion, social media platforms increasingly hurting your visibility if you think
You link.
external. Did I say that
If
wrong?
you link, yeah, you did. If you link internally,
If you link internally, yes. Wow, you know what I've learned in the last week? I
you
need
need a
new
new prescription,
I need a new prescription. Yeah. Uh,
or
so
maybe bigger words on your teleprompter there.
that's it. Yeah. If
Yeah.
you link externally, I've heard this. Like when you're on X and you say, "Hey,
Uh,
are you backed up?" We talk about this week on the show. Link, and I'm like, I am a person that always writes for the visitor. If it's on a website, social media, like I don't want, and they're like, no, just write the first one and then put the link as like you reply to yourself. And
yeah.
I'm like, doesn't that make you go blind? I don't know, but you you're replying to yourself, and I was like, hey, the only reason I can think of that is
Oh,
that they don't want you using automated tools to
yeah.
post.
Right, right.
And I was like,
Right.
so I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna be a rebel. I'm putting links in my stuff. And if it downgrades me, I'm like, again, follow me. And I'm assuming that if you're following me, you'll still see my stuff. I don't know. And in the end, I kind of don't care. I'm just like, hey, it just seems dumb and counterintuitive. So
Listen. I want to blame social media for negativity and hate, but and those kinds of things. But social is made up of us, and we're the problem. It's our fault that social is the way it is, right? We need to take some ownership of that, and I hear people all the time who rail on this, and then you will see them on social railing against other people,
right,
or feeding the beast. Stop feeding the beasts. Like, stop engaging with them, stop talking to them, block them if you need to. I mean, if you just don't want to see it, block it, right? From that standpoint, or do what you can, or leave it, right? If you can't. But I still think there's a lot of good things that can be done on those platforms. I mean, I'm still on all of them, and they're severely limited for me on what I do. I've completely stopped posting personal things on Facebook, but I run giant user groups out there on Facebook, so I need to be on the platform, trying not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. But listen, we have to. The responsibility for social is you. You control what you see. You control what's out there, and you control what you post. And I am getting a little tired, even though I just said it. I am
right.
getting a little tired of the argument that it's somehow something beyond what we control, and we can't. Well, you know what? Be a force for good out there then. If you see it as being so negative and you're gonna be on it, be out there and be a force for good. Try to do good things. And then just realize there's gonna be bad people out there. And it's just
Yep.
gonna happen. You listen, you can't argue them away. Stop trying,
Yeah.
people. Stop it. You can't.
Yeah.
They are fed by that. They
I,
thrive when you try to do that. Stop doing it.
yeah. I,
Stop doing it.
well, Todd the Gator has a great point. People remove their filters when they're anonymous. Yep.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, anonymous. You shouldn't. If listen, if someone's posting, we have a local Facebook group here for Bellevue, Nebraska, where I live, and it's fairly unmoderated for the most part. And when someone posts anonymous in that group, they just get blistered. Just get blistered. So, there's a little bit of that social pressure as well. But I just think we control, Dave. I think we control a lot. You control what you're reading, you control what you see, you control what's out there. Can you still I have a really good group on, people talk about Discord. I have a really good group on Discord. Why? Because it's heavily moderated. Our groups on Facebook, pretty good. Why? Because they're heavily moderated. you know
Yeah.
we we, we yeah, we control this, friends.
If you want to see an interesting documentary, I watched it. It's all about Jerry Springer and how Jerry started off like every other talk show and a guy just came in and said, we're going to do the direct opposite. And he ended up for a few weeks, he was more popular than Oprah. And it was all, and what it showed was like working there was hideous because once you've got the guy that married his horse, like, where do you go?
Right.
And you can't do the horse. Like this week, we got a guy that married a pig. Okay, well, it's not as outrageous anymore. So you just have to keep getting more and more and more. And eventually they had that case where there was a love triangle and the guy ended up killing somebody. And the whole thing was like, is it Jerry's fault? But the whole point was the reason they kept upping it is because the ratings went up. And they're like, so don't blame Jerry.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, and
No,
everybody.
blame Jerry. You can still blame Jerry.
Yeah. But the whole thing was basically the fact that the more outrageous it got, the bigger the ratings. The bigger the ratings, the less the network cared. They're like, hey, do whatever you want. We're making bank. We'll pay Jerry $30 million. We got tons of that stuff. So it's an interesting just social experiment to see that.
Yeah.
We got some great comments here. Let's see. That's an old one. Yes. Coach Dave. Yes, you can make a successful podcast. Depends on how, define success. Yes. As a tool to teach yourself how to organize and speak. You don't even need an audience. That is true. Andreas says, I'm thinking about doing a newsletter for my new podcast. I got a book called Newsletter Ninja. Come on. Who doesn't want to read a book? Stephanie said that. I will read a book called Ninja. Tanner Rutledge says, meeting people is a great why. I started mine to network with people in publishing. I didn't have the funds to go back to school and wouldn't have the knowledge and support to get my books out. Yep. So there again, it's back in the day when I used to teach how to surf the internet. God, I'm old. But I used to teach a class called How to Surf the Internet. And I would explain, there was a big disclaimer at the beginning that if you go down Main Street, you've got the library. And look, it's the Akron Peanut Shop. It's been there since 1921. And this and on this side, you've got hookers and drugs and, so which side of the street, it's up to you. But, focus on the good side. Dan says he agrees with Dave. That's why I think social is great for the existing audience. The algorithm discoverability promotes staying on platform for ad revenue, of course, which is why growth is hard. Why he thinks growth is hard. Yeah. Coach Dave says, I would argue that people with bad motives have figured out how to trigger our dopamine. Oh, boy, have they.
Yeah, they have.
We know how to trigger people, just as they've made food addictive for greed and profit. Yep. They made the social experiment addictive. Yeah, that's been proven over and over. It's in the stats on that are crazy. How many people roll out of bed and grab their phone? And it's like, oh, it's crazy. The one thing, and then Jeff has a great one. Social is just another tool. Just don't be a tool on social.
That's a great line. That would make a great T-shirt.
T-shirt, isn't it?
Yeah. Jeff, you should get that made. That's a good line. We won't steal it. That's your line.
Yeah. Chris says, if you don't have social media but have guests, use them to promote the episodes. Yep.
Yeah.
There's always use your audience. But the one thing that Andreas said here about the newsletter thing, the beauty of the newsletters, people have purposely said, I want your stuff. And to me, with search, we talked about it last week, like what's going to happen to search with all this AI stuff? To me, I think a newsletter, I was on a growth summit put together by Captivate and Adobe this week, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And at the end, they said, okay, we've got a lightning round. I'm like, I'm not good with lightning round. Getting to the point, not my strong suit. And the first question was, should a podcaster have a newsletter? And I just said, yes. Like, yes, even if you don't know what it is, grab those emails because eventually there's going to be the day it's like, I need to communicate with my people, but I don't want to do this in public. Oh, wait a minute. I got a newsletter. So that's, yeah.
Well, and newsletters, and this is the way I see a lot of the YouTubers I watch, they use the newsletter as kind of the source of truth for their whatever they're doing, to say, hey, if all else fails, if YouTube unsubscribes you for some reason, or if you see something on social that doesn't look right, or if any of those kinds of things, you can always come back to our newsletter. And when I was doing newsletters for a while, I'd also post a copy of the newsletter on the site, so folks could come out and say, oh, here's the last 12 newsletters that was done. And if they've lost connectivity to you in some way through whatever platform, whether it's a podcast platform that unsubscribed you or unfollowed you, or YouTube or whatever, you could always go back there to get like what's the most current thing. So it is a great way. A newsletter is a great way of being off of the echo chamber, so to speak, or being off of the social spaces, and a place where people can come and get it, or you can communicate with them. The one drawback to it is email is still a very broken system. So you got to make sure, if you're going to have a newsletter and you're going to have, this is my part of my job. I just got the report. I just got this report on Friday before I went home, of bounces. And we had, we sent 10,000 emails, and I think I had 12 bounces, which is really good for what we do. But you can't just can't have people sign up, and then if you try to send them the email and it bounces, you might want to try to track them down if you can, and say, hey, the email you gave me is bouncing. Do we want to fix this? When I took over that job back during the pandemic, so 2020, summer of 2020, we had 2,000 bounces. Like, because nobody had been maintaining that list. And so you just assume, oh yeah, people, they'll give me their most recent email, or the email they gave me, oh yeah, they definitely monitor that email box, and it never fills up. Gmail, it never fills up, and it never starts blocking, or they start getting blocked. If something's the email you're sending to them is getting blocked, or getting bounced.
They didn't get fired from their job when they laid off 1,200 people at the factory.
Right.
It's like,
yeah, we saw a lot of that in the beginning of the pandemic. We saw a lot of that. There was this thing we called the Great Resignation, and a full third here in the United States, a full third of everybody changed jobs for 3 years. Like, we all changed jobs.
wow.
And so that led a little bit to the, people would have given us their work email address, and of course, and they don't think, like, it's like when you what would be a good example of this? You change email providers, and then you got to think, oh, it's like when your credit card number changes.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, who have I given, what services have that credit card number for annual renewals? And you try to, unless you've written it down somewhere, you try to remember. It's the same thing with your email address. You change your own email address, and you're like, oh, what have I signed up for under that email address that's no longer going to work?
And that's where you figure out which of those newsletters you are actually getting something from, because those are going to be right. Any newsletters that's memorable, you will remember, and those that you didn't, you won't. And so, yeah, it's tricky. There have been times when I've tried other podcast apps, and most of them will let you export a thing called an OPML file, I think it is. And that it's just a format of a basically list of all your shows, and then you import it, and presto, all your shows are in the new app. And some of them don't have that feature. And I'm like, ooh, I'm starting from scratch. So I'm like, okay, let's search. Okay, well, I need no agenda. Okay, I need this, I need that. And all of a sudden, it wasn't until later that you'll see something where on social that's like, hey, I spoke with so-and-so this week. That's a great episode, whatever. Check it out. I was like, oh, I totally forgot about those guys. So that's, I think that's what social does. I don't know that it's going to grow your audience. I know Gary Arndt over at Everything Everywhere Daily gets 1 million downloads a month. And this is a guy that writes basically a term paper every night, or basically does enough research for that, and then creates about a 10-minute podcast every day. And he was just pressed for time, so he quit doing social, and he goes, and it did nothing for my numbers. Like, he goes, no, not even a dip. He goes, it just did. So I always say it's a trickle. Don't get hung up on it. But I have seen things that, I'm like, hey, I totally forgot about them, and then I saw them do something on social. I just hate the fact that I now have to go to X, and then I go to Blue Sky, and then I go to Threads, and then I go to whatever, so it's hard to keep up on that. So, yeah, Dan says OPML is just a playlist. Yeah, it's handy. What's weird though, I forget what the app was, and you didn't know who to blame. Like I exported it out of app A, and then I go to import it into app B, and you're like, and it didn't work, and you're like, okay, is the importer wrong or the exporter wrong? Because that's it's supposed to be kind of a standard. And so, but speaking of being social with people, my favorite people to be social with are our awesome supporters. And you could be an awesome supporter by simply going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And we like to remind you that this show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting.com. Use the coupon code COACH and get a discount in either a monthly or yearly subscription. And that includes all the courses, all the coaching, and of course, a really awesome community. And I'm clicking and the button's not doing anything. We run on Podpage. If you want to check out Podpage, check it out at trypodpage.com. And if you've never tried Podpage, and just go over, you can see where you can put your RSS feed in. It's amazing. Also, I'll be at booth 32 at Podfest. So if you want to talk Podpage, I'll be there for that. We're using Ecamm. You can find that at askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm. That's my affiliate link. And what's going on? If you need more Jim Collison, and hey, who doesn't need more Jim Collison? Well, then you can simply go over to theaverageguy.tv, check out Home Gadget Geeks. And apparently my mouse is just dead. And we're going to go over now and find the awesome supporter of the week. Will it be the... Yes, will it be...
Supporters.
Of supporters, yes. Will it be... Ross's book is out. I think I mentioned that last week about he does his predictions. Well, he doesn't. He asks a bunch of people to do predictions. We got the girls over at Flame Alive. Craig over at AI Goes to College. I was listening to that this morning. He was talking about things about Google Notebook that I was unaware of. But we will spin the wheel and see. We will spin the wheel. We will honestly spin the wheel. Okay, I'm going to move this over here. Oh, wait. Now we will... Hold on. Now we will spin the wheel. There we go. I'm like, what's going on? And survey says it's coming up on... Oh, there you go. Right where we started off with. The ladies over at flamealivepod.com. If you're into the Olympics, they're amazing. This is a case where, again, when you start a podcast in a niche and, they cover all sorts of stuff that's just not getting any mainstream stuff. So they've interviewed Olympians, and they got to go to, where was it? Japan? France? Someplace last year.
Paris.
Paris, yeah. They got to go to Paris, all sorts of fun stuff because of their podcast. So flamealivepod.com. And you know who did their website? The one and only Mark from podcastbranding.co. There you go.
Nice.
So if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, you might be thinking, hey, those guys save me time. They save me money. They save headaches. Maybe they just make us laugh. You can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and join one, be one, join the group. It's all there. And I'm playing right now, so I can say this. It's also ad-free. I'm playing with Buzzsprout's ad tool. And somebody came across, and it was another podcast kind of about podcasting. And I'm like, okay. So it's, I get, let's see, what's 14 divided by 1,000? 0.0014 cents a download, something like that.
Tenth of a cent.
Yeah, it's whatever 14 divided by 1,000 is. So
it's not a lot. That's a very small number. Podfest is next week. So are we off next week?
Oh, that is a great question. I'm going to guess yes, because I remember Podfest is long. I know I'm leaving the 15th, and
looks like it's the 16th through the 19th.
So I will be So no show next week. Yeah,
it's good.
And
it's good.
If you're at Podfest, I will be at booth 32. So that's the one advantage. When I didn't have a Libsyn booth, nobody knew how to find me. And so Podpage is sponsoring Podfest. We're also sponsoring Podcast Movement and Podcast Movement Evolutions. And so that's one of the... So it's kind of nice now to go, just go to this booth, and that's where I'll be. So it makes it really easy to find out here. Here's one. How, yes, do you get picked up by a media network? My podcast just hit 130,000 downloads. Nice. for 13 episodes, even nicer. And I'm completely independent. I'm also in the top 5% of video podcast on Spotify, apparently. I'm guessing that's a listen notes thing. I don't have a huge following, so I'm really grateful my podcast has taken off, but I'm under the impression I could probably insert self-read ads in addition to the ads Spotify is putting on the podcast to make more money from the podcast so I can dedicate more time to it. So he's on Spotify. There's part of the problem. However, I don't know anyone in the industry. Does anyone know how to get into contact with companies who could handle the business side? Well, if you're looking for ads, they're now called Libsyn ads. It used to be AdvertiseCast. There's that if you're looking for ads. And then there's Heather Osgood at True Native Media is another person that can help you find ads. The problem is if you're on Spotify, there is no, like on Captivate or Buzzsprout, you can put in whatever ads you have sold or promote your own stuff, which is more profitable. If you're on Spotify, here again, the walled garden is going to only put in ads that they get a cut of and that they bring you. So, and the other thing about networks is, and you're actually headed in the right direction. Networks typically, people think, oh, I'll get big if I can get on a network. Networks don't make shows big. They make big shows bigger. And if by chance you're hearing things in the background now, of course, my
Snowblower?
Snowblower. Yeah.
Nice.
Even though we got like no snow, and when I pulled in last night at 9:30, the driveway was fairly clear, but for whatever reason, my neighbor, who normally mows his lawn about every other, I don't know, hour, is now switched that to snow blowing the driveway,
Nice.
which I
Maybe you
appreciate.
should buy him an electric one. Buy him a battery
That's
one,
it.
so not quite so loud.
Yeah. Stephanie has a question. She says, does this, you know what? I said this last week. I have to fix this thing where I have two screens, and when I click on one screen, I have two desktops basically on my Mac. I don't know how I turned it on, and I need to turn it off. But Stephanie,
Do you want me to read? Do you want me to read the question from Stephanie?
Yeah,
Or do you got it?
I got it.
Okay.
Does
You
Dave
okay, old man?
do I let them know I talked about their question? I should. That would be a good question. I'd have to contact them personally. I always get worried about Reddit and Facebook about contacting people out there going to like, hey, he's spamming me. I just like.
I'd violate the rules of the Reddit group to just post, hey, we talked about this on the show.
Yeah.
And then put the link in Reddit. That'd violate those groups' policies. But yeah, you could. Yeah. And then it is weird. They didn't ask you to answer this question. Has anybody ever come back to you and said, hey, I didn't give you permission to use my question on your show?
To which I would say it's on Reddit. It's in public.
That's true. I mean,
and you
that's
asked for opinions.
Yeah.
I usually always answer it there while I'm there, and I'm like, oh, this is something outside of the norm. So Ray over at Around the Layout says bleh, to non-related ads. Spend some time and get yourself some topic-related ads that you can make 100% of the profit of. There you go. Said the man who does a model train show. So he's got a hyper niche show, and if he can get a sponsor, somebody that does something in that space, I'm sure you can charge more than 0.00. There was one thing I looked at. It was like $2 CPM, and I'm like, come on, that's almost nothing. Like that's just I saw that, I was like, it's crazy. Andrea says, if you'd like to get signed and a dedicated copy of Profit from Your Podcast. Oh, he's doing a plug for me.
No. He says, if I'd like to get a signed copy, he's saying, would you send a signed copy of your book to him in Costa Rica? That's what he's asking. He wants a free copy. He wants a copy of your book.
It's
you need to buy it, of course, and then you would sign it there.
Yeah.
Can he buy it from you? Do you have a way of him buying your book directly from you, or does it have to go through?
Yeah. If you buy a signed copy,
how do you do that?
I basically well, first of all, thanks to our good friends at Sticker Mule, I have a branded bag that the book goes in, along with a bubble wrap kind of thing.
Oh, nice.
But these are cute. right? So it's a bag that has my School of Podcasting logo on it. And then I go to the post office and I go, I would like to mail this media mail, which is cheaper than normal mail. And they go, does it have, it's always weird. They're like, because I'll say it's a book. And then they'll go, does this have any hazardous, I guess they have to ask. And then they charge me whatever it is. It's usually, I don't know, $5-6 to, actually probably not even that much. I'd have to go look. But let me ask. I'll ask I'll ask the people at the post office, how much is it to ship something to Costa Rica? And then in some cases, this is where's Costa Rica?
South America.
South America, yeah.
Oh, it's Central America. Technically,
yeah,
it's Central.
Yeah, because I was like, I know in some cases, I did a contest once, and the guy that won was in Russia, and they're like, yeah, you can't ship anything to Russia. And I was like, oh,
No.
okay.
Not right now. Not
Yeah.
Americans. You can, nope. You cannot do it.
But I will, I'll see if I can't find out what the shipping is, and if it's not insane. Yeah, absolutely, man. Chris says, I've been blocked from Reddit from answering questions, so no more Reddit for us. Here's the thing that's weird with me is I would go over and somebody would say, what's the best microphone under $100? And I'd go, Samsung Q2U, Audio-Technica ATR 2100. And I would get a flag. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you need to disclose that you're from Libsyn and you run the School of Podcasting. And I'm like, but I didn't comment on media hosts. And
Was
I
that
didn't
Bangs? Was Bangs
it was
busting
Bangs.
on you?
Yeah.
God,
So
come on, Bangs.
So now, well, Bangs, and there are other moderators over there.
Yeah.
And so now, after every single, if I sneeze over there, I have a text expander, and I'm not complaining. It's free publicity, and it says I need to moderator disclosed. I'm the head of podcasting at podpage.com and the founder of the School of Podcasting.
Yeah.
So because I asked them, I'm like, hey, I keep getting flagged for stuff, and they're like, you just need to disclose. I'm like, what does that look like? And they're like, we just need to say this. I'm like, okay, fine by me.
I understand. Listen, I was giving Bangs a hard time, but I understand why I've had to do this in my own groups where every single post was just an advertisement.
Yeah.
One, they were just advertising to each other, and then two, all the responses were, well, you can come to my site. And I had some people contact me in the group are like, yeah, I'm leaving because it's just sales. Everything is a sales pitch. And so as a moderator, you're like, okay, how do we slow that? How do we slow that down? You think you're being helpful in the beginning by posting those? I mean, shoot. 10 years ago, it was awesome. You'd put all these affiliate links in and there was all these great kind of opportunities there. That's being shunned now. Put an affiliate without disclosing it is kind of shunned. But it is, from a group moderator standpoint, I do understand that side of the equation. Otherwise, Dave, and I know you meant well, but there's others who will just blast in, and it's not spam in the sense that it's bad. It's just people get overwhelmed. This is like the microphone conversation. People think they're going to go to a chat room and they're going to say, hey, what's the best microphone? And they think they're going to get a definitive answer.
No.
And it's like, well, depends what you're doing and how much you want to spend. But here's 15 mics. They're no better off after that conversation sometimes than they were before they asked the question, because in those kinds of groups with those kinds of questions, I don't know in some cases if our answers are actually helpful.
Yeah. It's well, I just did on my YouTube channel. Then this was an episode of the School of Podcasting where instead of saying what's the best media host, I explained what the features are, because I love Captivate. But if somebody goes, well, I'm going to do 2 episodes a month, they're going to be about 20 minutes long. So bi-weekly, 20 minutes long. We don't really care about monetization. Is Captivate the best choice for that? No, Libsyn is. $7 a month. Like, I just saved you $13 a month because you don't need some of the, now Captivate has all their dynamic stuff and AI tools and things like, if you're just doing 2 episodes a month, Libsyn, use the coupon code SOP free. I think that still works. Here's a fun question that I was like, is there a none of the above? They asked about a podcast name. I need an option on which podcast name out of the following would pique people's interest to listen to. So that's a good one because you want people to click on it, but you also want them to know what it is. Curated, how do you pronounce CAAO? Kyo? That's half the problem.
Ciao. I don't
Chow,
know.
there you go.
Yeah.
Offbeat and On Point podcast or Fashionably Late podcast. And so when I saw all of these, I was not over, like, I just kind of like I don't think that's gonna work for me, because I don't know what it's about. Now, if you picked Offbeat and On Point, because that is the one, or Fashionably Late, you would just need a tagline, something like Fashionably Late, stories of such and such, blah 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 blah. Like in any kind of book, right? The audience is listening. That's the name. And then a tagline, a little guide to building a big podcast by Tom Webster, right? So you need a tagline because these are not obvious to me. And I didn't start this off as a plug, but I didn't even know we had this until, oh, doggone it. Hold on. Let's go incognito. Podpage has a name planner at the very bottom of our page. And it's actually not bad. So come on. Did I spell it wrong? This is always fun when it's live. Podpage doesn't support a secure. Really? That's always fun.
Just put S by the P.
Yeah,
HTTPS.
but if I go, that's me. I'm like, well, I thought I did that. Survey says. Anyway, at the bottom of Podpage, there is an option and you put in what the show's about, et cetera, and it will, forget that. But anyway, there is a name creator at the bottom of the pod page, and I played with it. It was like, that's kind of cool. So, so for that person I don't even have their name, so I couldn't even go back and say, hey, we talked about your name question on, Ask the Podcast Coach.
Well, those names, as we were looking at the three of them, they're so specific. Well, the two bottom ones are super general.
Yeah.
And the top one, I think, is ultra niche. Like there's some kind of niche you and I don't know what that is. And
Right.
so, that's where, as you're picking titles, if you're going to be a super niche podcast, just know if you go niche with your title, it's going to limit it. Now, I think at some point the title stops mattering. If you get enough people and you get enough momentum going and you're doing enough and you're out there enough, the title itself, kind of, there's a couple podcasts that I listen to now. I'm not even sure what the title is, to be honest with you. Like the Wall Street Journal podcast, it's got a title, but I don't know what it is.
Right.
I just like it. I subscribe to it. I listen to it every day, twice a day to get my news. But I don't know the whiskey. There's a couple whiskey podcasts that I listen to. I don't know what their titles are. So at some point, it kind of stops mattering. And I know you, from a discoverability standpoint, you're thinking, yeah, Jim, but it does matter. And you're right, it does in that case. But for your actual listeners, once they find you, it stops being kind of relevant in the way that people react to it. So of those three, I mean, I think for all of us, my original tech show is called Home Tech. Well, okay, it's pretty general, right? Then I changed it to Home Gadget Geeks because Dave McCabe and I were going to be forming this Geeks network that we were going to be putting together. And so I changed the name of my show to match the network. Now we ended up not ever doing anything with it. And I liked the change. I liked the home. I was actually surprised nobody had that to begin with. And it was a great change for me, and it worked. And when I tell people, yeah, Home Gadget Geeks, they go, oh yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense. I kind of get I get an idea what we're doing there. So the title is is one of those hard decisions to make. You're never gonna find a title that's gonna be 100% perfect. It's gonna be close.
Well, and I can also
say,
say, when it comes to names, things like with the words like 4 or 2, if you decide to go with the number 2, you will want to jump off a bridge about a year into your show, because you'd be like, oh, it's called faith to fun, but it's faith the number 2 fun, and about
Yeah.
the 4,000th time you do that, I'm like, I should have just paid for the
Yeah.
because I mean, working at Libsyn, going to a conference, I would go, they'd come up and they'd go, what's the difference between Blueberry and Lisbon? And I'd go, it's Libsyn. It's short for Liberated Syndication. And that was it. I wasn't snarky about it. And then they'd
Yeah.
go, but okay, so how is LibSync better than Buzzsprout? And I'm like, ugh, it's Libsyn. It's short for I'm
Yeah.
like, I just want to go back in time and find the founding fathers of Libsyn and go, don't call it Libsyn, call it
Yeah.
media hosting or something. So, yeah.
I'm sure it sounded really cool at the time.
Oh
Oh yeah,
yeah,
we're Libsyn.
yeah. We're gonna,
Liberated syndication. We're Libsyn. And
yeah,
you're like, lib who?
yeah,
Liberace?
yeah. And then how do you spell it? No, it's and then
Oh.
is it SIN? No, we're not the devil. Yeah,
Not the devil.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Here's a fun one. Fresh off the presses. Hey everyone, I've been a long time Riverside user, but now they slapped a paywall on all export features with 0 prior notice. That's not good. I would check your spam folder. I don't know Riverside at all, but I'd check your spam folder. Suddenly I can't export anything without upgrading my plan to Pro. Yes, that's how those features work. That's how they get you to pay. This feels completely unfair and predatory. If you're using the free plan, maybe they were on, because I know for a while Spotify was working with Riverside. I reached out to their support team multiple times for an explanation on a workaround, but I'm getting nothing but silence. That might be their manager going, don't answer yet. Has anyone else experienced this? We deserve an actual notification from the company for this aggressive behavior. But my thing is, if you are on the free plan, I don't even know if Riverside has a free plan, you can't really complain. You might complain that, hey, it would have been nice if I had a notice, but I don't remember ever getting a notice from StreamYard that the price was going up. I remember hearing.
They
Did
sent
they
out
send
emails.
something out? Okay.
Yeah, they sent out some emails.
Yeah. So that's
Dave, this is the bane on the other side of things for my day job. This is the bane of my existence where if in some cases, if I didn't drive to the person's house and knock on their door with a registered
oh yeah.
letter or personally delivering the information to them
Write it in
to
the
say,
sky.
yeah, write it in, make sure it was on, the other side of this is sometimes I get feedback. Yeah, you talk too much. There's too many emails. I unsubscribed because I was getting too many emails from you. And you're like, yeah, because they're important. Like
Right.
that's how we notify you of these kinds of changes. This is a people problem, in the world. There are folks who, and listen, if you have one email address and you're having everything sent to it, and your email address has been sold, which is I think every email address on the planet right now, chances are you're getting an enormous amount of spam. Like you say, check your spam folders, right? But this is definitely why email is broken, right? It
Yeah.
just is. And people think like, no one told me. No, they probably did. Now, is changing your plans, in StreamYard's case, is the price changes they made, is that predatory? That's a strong word. Like
Yeah.
that's a really strong word for like these people are they're a business. If if you started someplace on a free plan and it's free forever, well, you won the lottery.
Yeah.
But I think by now most of us know the freemium model is going to be eventually to create
Yeah.
to bring it in. I mean, even Podpage was this way in a lot of ways, right? Started free, a lot of great stuff, and then as I go out there now, and more of those services are being paid for. Is that predatory? Probably not. Is that business? It absolutely is.
I
Right?
was
Careful
using
with
an
the word.
Yeah, I was using an app called Fit for Friends, and we were doing little challenges, and it's been free for years. And they now charge $5 a month per person. And so everybody's like, I'm out. And I went and looked for I need a free app to do weight loss challenges on Android and iOS. And there was one, and there's so much spammy ads that pop up in your
Oh,
face that I'm
yeah.
pretty sure that group is just going to go, hey, it was fun while it lasted, but we're out. I do want to get one. John, I'm sorry. I pinned this and then totally forgot about it. How can I find a podcast producer overseas recording and or editing rec place to invite?
A
Search.
recording place,
Or
or
is
place
to
to record,
oh,
invites, those kinds of things.
I know. I would just Google. What would you Google? Podcasting VA maybe, and a lot of VAs are overseas. The good news is it'll be dirt cheap. The bad news is you will have, in some cases, a language barrier and a time difference. So they will be going to bed when you tell them I need this in 30 minutes, and that whole 9 yards. But that is dirt cheap. I don't know
Well,
any off the
maybe,
top of my
maybe not
maybe.
not every location. I mean, is the cheapest, but
Yeah.
Fiverr may be a place to get started on something like this. At least if they've gone to Fiverr, they've put a few things together. You
Yeah.
know,
I know if right now, if you're getting somebody in the States, you're paying somewhere between $100 and $200 an episode, depending on what you want. If you're doing video, it's definitely going to be closer to 200 than 100. But if you want show notes and transcripts and video clips and all that stuff, that takes a lot of time. But I honestly, it's funny. I asked somebody yesterday in the School of Podcasting, because I know somebody with a VA, and I said, I need somebody to do mind numbingly kind of silly work, but it needs to be done, which is like take this code and copy it from this system into this system and then do it about, I don't know, 72 times. Like, it's not hard. It is time consuming. And it's just one of those things like, well, I have to do that later. And I'll have to do that later. It's not that important. I'm just like, okay, I kind of would like to move these along. And I get approached probably about once a month from a VA company. Do you need anybody? And to which I always go, do you have an affiliate program? And they always say no. And that's pretty much where that stops. And not that if they did have an affiliate program, I would promote them, but I would at least then hire them to do something for me so I could see what it was like. But if anybody in the chat room has any ideas on that, yeah. Coach Dave had a question about Gallup. He says, "Where's the
oh,
best?" Yeah.
yeah, just worried. I said just a minute ago, this customer problem of folks wanting, a personal delivery of information to them, or we didn't contact them about it. And sometimes I say these kinds of things, and Dave is like, hey, what if this gets back to your clients or your place of employment? I've said it. I've said this on my Gallup podcast before. It's not. I'm not. This not a blaming of who I work for or my customers. It's a struggle in an expectation of people, right? This is in the space. I talk about this inside our groups all the time, of just the challenge of being able to get the bane is not the customers or the company. The bane is the problem of email, right? This is we think we're sending emails and clients are reading them. Clients think we're not communicating to them because they're not getting them because of spam or folders that are too busy, or they get too many emails. The bane is a broken problem with communication, or with the assumption. I just talked about this in a meeting the other day.
Hmm.
The problem is we think we have a bulletproof system of communication with email, and it's just flat out broken. It is just broken. We think, oh no, we sent you an email, and they're like, well, I didn't get it, and like, no, I know you did. Well, I didn't, right? And this is a a communications problem. We talked about other ways of communicating to them, including putting it on the website and putting it in the app and some of those kinds of things. So Coach Dave, don't misunderstand me or don't mishear me. And you did, obviously, as from the comment you made. The dilemma there is not who I work for or who my customers are. The problem is we have a broken system called email, and everybody thinks on either side, and this is generally, I think, true in any service organization. The organization thinks, "Hey, I notified you," and the customer thinks, "I didn't get it." And
Yeah.
it's a huge giant disconnect in there. It's why I created all the social channels and why I created different ways, 1,000 different ways to do things so people would be notified. But no matter what I do, we just went through a pricing change ourselves here at the end of the year. And man, I blasted it everywhere. And, first of the year, somebody comes back and says, "I never heard about it." And you're like, where have you been? How
Yeah.
can you not, and I get complaints on the other side saying you're talking about it too much, so to speak.
Well, I know we're at time, but I want to show
Oh,
this
sorry
is
about that. Sorry about
no, this is how I check. I've not checked my email yet this morning, so I will go here. I already answered Jen's question, so I'll go here and I'll go delete. So there's whatever 20 waves. Don't need that. Don't need yoga. Okay, so there's one I need, and then a bunch of things, and I need to follow up with a student on volley. But I mean, the first 40, 50
Yeah,
emails I get a
yeah,
day are
yeah,
just, and I know you're like, well,
yeah.
unsubscribe, and I'm like, I wish it was
It's
that
a
easy.
real dilemma. It's a real communications dilemma that we're in, and even with your podcast listeners, you think you say it in a podcast, and you're like,
Oh
"Oh
yeah,
yeah, I told people, next week we're off." And we've said it now twice in this podcast. There will be people next Saturday who are like, "Where's Dave and Jim? How come they didn't tell?" No, they're not going to say it that way,
yeah,
obviously, but it's just it's always Coach Dave, don't apologize. I think it's a good topic. I think we sometimes think, well, I told them, and our customers like, well, I didn't hear.
oh yeah.
Who's wrong? Neither one of them are wrong.
It's hard to communicate with customers because I know at Libsyn, we had a newsletter, we had a podcast, we had a YouTube channel, and we'd mention the same thing in all three. And people are like, I never got the message, and I'm like, how is that possible? So it's tricky
Oh, I
when you
know, I know. It's so hard, and it creates such a bad customer experience.
yeah,
Because they don't listen. You can't. I try, but you can't tell them. We did send it. I mean,
right,
and I can prove it, but you don't want to get in a prove it kind of. These are your customers. You don't want to get in a prove it. I end up apologizing. Very, very sorry we didn't get the information to you. If I can
right.
make this right in some way, we will. Right, but it definitely is. The email is a problem, and there isn't a great solution for it.
No.
You know, yeah.
But here's a way to fix it. Coach Dave says it's a software service follow up. This is a great tool for automatically following up with people
Oh,
who don't
they'd
respond.
even they'd even get more angry because that tool would send them and they'd be like, "You talk to me too much." It's such a I don't know if there's a good solution for it. Just to be honest, part of it's a
Yeah,
human problem, right? Part of it is a human problem.
yeah, yeah. Well,
All right. Well,
we could
sorry to
go on
drag
for
that.
hours.
But
No,
it was a good conversation. And Coach Dave, thanks for clarifying that or saying that. Sometimes I'm very, very careful about what I say on this show in relations to my job. It does play in. It does have a piece that plays into it, but I wouldn't say I don't think I'm secret here
yeah.
as the podcast coach. It does go out live, so
I
I have to be very careful.
if I have a story, it's usually like I was working with a client, and if I was working with a client, it is typically not something that's happened in the last month. Like I want some
Right.
time from when it happened to, and usually, if it's something where something great happened, I'll be like, oh, Ray at aroundthelayout.com had this amazing survey. But if it's something like, like the guy a couple weeks ago that came on my chat and his podcast idea was I'm going to put a video on YouTube and spam everybody. And I was like, that's a strategy, not the one I would recommend,
Yeah.
But Jim, what's coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Yeah, Mike Uyghur, a former co-host, is back on the show. We spend a little time. A couple subjects that he's trying. He may be changing my mind on. One is VR, and so we
Mm,
spent. I still like to this day. I still can't figure out a great use case for VR besides a pure entertainment kind of thing. He had some different opinions on it, so we spent a little time talking about that and some home backup stuff and some
yeah.
other geekery as well. It's posted right now. HomeGadgetGeeks.com.
Did you guys talk about porn? Did you?
No, no.
Oh, okay, because that's the most like the industry
I
that's
know,
using that. Yeah,
I
okay. But
know,
anyway,
I know.
on
They're
this
first on everything, unfortunately. Yeah.
on the schoolofpodcasting.com, I am talking not so much launch, but why we quit a little bit. It's kind of a 101, but it's the beginning of the year, and we thought we'd do that. But no show next week. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody.